Ka nongo Yalme. Thank you, Yalme. Jalanguru Garwar Balangara. Good afternoon, everybody. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Yananga yada ranganda jiwa moai kumat yaneo, yolungo yaneo. Today we gather on the lands of the Gumat, the Yolngu people. Nganda jidanga ngaraga, wenye ngaraga, you hear, this is my language I'm speaking. Danga ngaraga punaba, my language punaba. Nganda ngaraga kani ngara dangane, English paljoa. So this is my first language I use to address you. English came later. So again, I acknowledge the Gumaj and all the Yolngu people of the land we gather on today, and I pay my deep respects to your elders here with us at home, elders past, present and emerging. And a big warm welcome to everyone. And I'll soon welcome the panel members for the panel on value of partnerships in education. What a fantastic day, and how inspiring to have heard this morning and up to this last panel, the discussion so far around partnerships and the importance of education. Partnerships are often about how we sit in a space of active dialogue where we listen deeply, and bring into reality what people have said. And I acknowledge the diversity in the audience here today. A strong and expansive education opens worlds to us. Education helps us, it helps to form us as individuals while equipping us with the tools to influence and develop the societies, cultures, and humanity that we want to be a part of. Education is a change maker. And the leaders we have with us today know the power of education to empower our peoples while affirming our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander identities and heritages, and maintaining our vital intergenerational knowledge that comes from the beginning of time. There is no better place and no better space to discuss the value of these educational partnerships than on country. The land is our first and lifelong teacher. Our Indigenous educational systems have always been foundational to engaging in life, to living life, and bringing our worlds into being. If I may just share of my early personal journey of learning with you. In my early years, I was fully immersed in this form of education. My grandmother was very distrusting of Western institutions and educators. She and my mother raised me on country. My grandmother would navigate the land and teach me through action and voice, naming every plant, rock and water site, seeing and feeling the interactions between the seasons, the surrounding environment, the country, and us. Later, I attended a mission school in Fitzroy Crossing, and even later to a boarding school in Perth. Throughout my Western education, I had a strong foundation of our ancestral knowledge. I was driven to learn and succeed while never relinquishing any aspect of my Bunuba self. I learnt to walk in both worlds, to step from one reality into another with the educational tools from both existences and learning journeys. In many respects, I was fortunate. I can move from my country into offices in downtown Sydney and back again, and I still continue to learn from both spaces. I have always wanted to bring these worlds together, not in collision, but to unite them and understand how they can influence, inform, and support one another. And this is what many of our panellists are doing. Dr. Helen Drennan, or Lidiala, as we know her by. Lidiala and I co-established Yiramalay Studio School to develop this cross-cultural form of education where Indigenous and non-Indigenous students learn on country and in the city. But today we are also challenged by the reality of what the imposition of a Western education system has done to our people. For many of our people, our connection to country, family and kin, our teachers and our classrooms were severed multiple times. First at colonisation, and then when ongoing policies of removals, the stolen generation and assimilation followed. The intergenerational ramifications of the denial of our education, which is fundamentally a denial of the worth of our knowledges and who we are as a people, have been extreme. The consequences are systemic issues such as trauma, poverty, the damaging consumption of alcohol and drugs, family and domestic violence and others, and as we heard from the previous panel. These all add layers of complexities and barriers to engaging many of our children and young people in education today. Still, no matter the overwhelming challenges we face, our peoples have survived, and with them they carry vital learnings of resilience and our inherent values of intergenerational care, learning and responsibility. There is another foundational lesson from our Indigenous education approach, that we teach knowledge to live and survive by, and to continuously communicate and engage with the world around us. These are principles that need to be reinvigorated within education systems to re-engage our children and our young people who have been let down by the system, while also affirming our individual and collective identities, connection and belonging to country, and our deep and expansive knowledge of this continent. To do this, it calls for courageous leadership and thinking around developing, testing and establishing creative intercultural models of learning. Models that unite our worlds, that ground teaching practices in our culture and learning methods, and that are healing and restorative, aimed at revitalising our society to full health and well-being. Fundamentally, it is our human right to have access to these forms of education. Forming these models and challenging and altering the Western mainstream conception of education, which has been a dominating and colonising force, is no easy feat. But our panellists today have and continue to do it. So on that note, and what I hope is a challenging and creative tone for this discussion, let's turn our thought leaders, let's turn to them, and I now welcome to the stage, and it is my absolute honour and privilege to facilitate this dialogue with these brilliant panellists, all of whom I admire and some I know very well, like Liriala. We have with us Palku Wonongmora, Chair of the Yambirpa School Council, and Brewa Monongur, Senior Cultural Advisor to the Yambirpa Homeland School, Philip Heath, Principal of Barker College, Dr. Helen Drennan, former Principal of Wesley College and founder of Yiramalay Studio School. We have Professor Sue Carthew, Provost and Vice President of Charles Darwin University, and Dr. Laurpa Maipelma, who has worked tirelessly with CDU to improve effective research to outcomes for her people. Have we got everybody? Some missing? Sure. All right, just getting clear with who we've got here and the questions we have for the panellists. First one, I'll invite Dr. Helen Drennan to respond to the question of, this scenario. One key challenge for partnerships and progress is what effective engagement looks like for educational institutions and communities. So what is required? What does it look like? Where are our examples of success? Yeah, do it there.
Well, thank you very much, June, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And especially, it's a great honour to have His Excellency David Hurley, the Governor-General of Australia, and his wife Linda Hurley with us. Partnerships. I might start by just taking the opportunity, June, to say a little bit about the Yiramalay Wesley Studio School, because this will provide the context for my response. Yiramalay, as we refer to it, is a new model of secondary school. It's called a studio school because it's a practical, flexible construct, the basis of which is two-way, side-by-side learning, holistic learning on country, bringing together Indigenous and non-Indigenous students sharing culture, knowledge, language and ways of knowing across years 10, 11 and 12. The school is located 80 kilometres outside Fitzroy Crossing on the Tunnel Creek Road in the Kimberley, Western Australia, which some of you will be familiar with. To understand how the partnership which has given birth to Yiramalay works and why it's been effective, I think it's very important to understand some of the underlying philosophical principles of the school. I've mentioned two-way, side-by-side, holistic learning. It is supported by a unique curriculum across three circles of learning: academic, industry, and personal social learning across cultures, and each is equally important. Its model of delivery is also unique. All students begin on country, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and that's very important because in the relationships, partnerships developing between the students, the Indigenous students are the leaders and they are the font of knowledge and wisdom on their country, Bunaba country. Students in this model, which I said was flexible, spend part of their time in Melbourne and couldn't be more farther away from the Kimberley than the southeast corner of our country at Wesley College, which is one of Australia's oldest independent schools. So why is it different and why has it worked? Well, I now get to the response to June's question. It's built on a genuine equal partnership between a big school and an Aboriginal community, working together, where the Bunaba and the Wesley voices are equally important. The nature of this partnership is critical to its success. From the beginning, it was also built on an understanding that the gap that we refer to in Indigenous education is actually two-way. And I'm sure those who've been listening carefully all day in this forum will be starting to appreciate something that we recognised at the beginning, and that is that the gap is bigger on the white side. Why has it worked? Well, I think in terms of the partnership, we begin at the highest level at governance, and it's critical that the voices between the partners are genuinely equal and deeply respected in a reciprocal way. All decisions that are taken by the governance and the operation, the management of the school, are always decisions that consider the long term. We're very fortunate to have Wesley College as one of the partners, which has been around so long. It's everything that happens has a very strong basis of continuity and stability. And I think that this is very important in all of the discussions we're having about government funding, policy making, etc. Whatever is decided needs to be long term. The other understanding that I think is very important that is a great tribute to the partnership is that the model of Yiramalay has never been a deficit model. There's always been a really amazing recognition of the gifts that the Aboriginal people in our partnership bring to the school. And that's recognised very strongly by the Wesley community. But probably thinking deeply about why the partnership works so well, it's because the model of how to work together has actually come to us from our students. We have Indigenous and non-Indigenous students learning side by side, and their response to this unique program is really, and has over its history so far, with 7 years of graduating Year 12 students, has led the way for the school. The students and their partnership and their ongoing commitment, many of them come back to the school requesting to do volunteer work for a year. And this is not just non-Indigenous students, this is Indigenous students. Indicates that something important is happening for them. So I think, to sum up, June, your question about where are the examples of success, there are examples, and I think we have to look in different places and we have to have different lenses, and we need to be prepared to look in new ways at what is working and what's not. So there's a commitment to change that's required, and certainly a big investment in innovative and creative thinking.
All right. Thank you, Lidiella. I'll now ask Balku, as chair of the Yambirpa School Council, are there any messages that you would like to send to schools or organisations which might seek to partner with your organisation.
School partners start with partnership with students and their families, listening to communities. Next comes the partnership with the key organisation who also supporting the families we work with. Working in science with those organisations strengthens the opportunity for positive outcomes for students, families, looking at the whole child. Partnership with the NT government are critical. Having the CE Minister in the audience is a key opportunity to showcase the great priorities that are happening across both Gulkula and Homeland schools, to invite them to work with us on these priorities, to strengthening their partnership with schools and communities, to engage in true local decision making. We invite them to be relaunch of secondary homeland education program in September, where we will be inviting them to be on the journey with us as a key partner. We want our government's partnerships to recognise that their funding models do not always work for the advantage of our children. Under the current funding model, our most at-risk children receive the least government support. We know children and love our children, and we are the ones to work with them. We are committed to keeping them strong, and homeland families do not want to be focused to send our children away to be assimilated into other communities. We want our children learning on country where there are no distractions, where kids' diets are healthy, where family is there to care for them. Listen to our voice. We have been saying these things for a long time, but you do not seem to listen. You do not seem to hear. We will not stop saying these things to you. So quicker you respect our voice, the quicker things will start to change. We want the governments to stop classifying our schools learning centres as learning centres, that as implementations for funding. Our homeland schools are not learning centres. They are schools, and they need to be funded as schools. Why is it that when Barniala changed from learning centre to independent school, they get much more support? But again, funding is only for non-Aboriginal teachers. not the Yolngu teachers. Lastly, partnership with organisations beyond our local areas or in other dominions, cotton on other schools. These partnerships should add value to our work, be used in adherence to good practice on the ground. There may be deliverance we used to get more independent initiative of the ground to fund a trial to demonstrate best practice to NTG. It is not only the money, it is not about money grab, it is about partnership for partnership's sake. Gulkula homeless schools have limited number of partners. We engage with a strategy and careful in our partnerships. Some examples. Gulkula ranges learning on country program, learning about language, culture, scene. This brings the whole community into the child's education journey. We are funded by the Northern Territory, Northern Land Council to employ a non-Yolngu person to facilitate this program, but NLC does not have any funds for any Yolngu to work alongside him. We need that Yolngu person walk alongside the facilitator. Melbourne Uni, a partnership that gives us access to quality teaching, education who are truly committed to working with their contacts. Cotton on a partnership that is enabling current priorities that relaunched the SHEP, Secondary Homeland Education Program, and growing new teachers. Gulkula School, partnership that contacts Yolngu people living in two very different contents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Valko. Brewa, with the role of Senior Cultural Advisor to Yambirpa Homeland School, what important points do you want to share about the partnership?
First of all, can you hear? Yeah. Just to say thank you that there are so many interested people here listening about education, and that's a good sign that you are listening. But with the partnership, we're not saying that we are not happy with the one particular company or department that are not doing so well as we expected. But we see that there are people interested out there that needs to be so much involved in what we are doing for our kids, and when it comes to being a partner along the line of education. That's a broader picture, and when you come to break it, I think there's maybe can see a dim light out there, that there is a way to unite those people, to engage them, to be partners with us, to work with us, and to be able to build on that relationship, how we can develop a better partnership to help our kids grow. And that's now saying that, there's no one is better than the other. We are doing this as a partner for the well-being of our kids. Yeah.
Our last panel member to speak this afternoon is Philip Heath from Barker College. Philip, can you talk about the evaluation of partnership work and explain why it's important?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I'm honoured to be here. I really want to acknowledge the Gumudj people. Thank you for your hospitality. I felt wonderfully warmly welcomed, and I know many others have felt what I have felt as well. Learned such a lot and loved soaking up the wisdom that we've been hearing. Thank you for that gift to us. I'm the head of a school in Sydney. It's a large school on the Upper North Shore. Most of my students will almost never have met an Aboriginal student of their own age and hardly ever meet an Aboriginal family. The big questions that face our nation for our children at a school like mine tend to be somewhere in the distance, or at least matters for political debate. That's not good enough. That isn't okay. These questions belong to all of us because we all benefit from this amazing land and the deep spirit that has been planted in this land. My first exposure in this space happened 12 years ago when I was the head of St Andrew's Cathedral School right in the middle of the city of Sydney. And there I met Ray Minnicon as a consequence of my work. And Ray and I began to dream about what might be possible, both to support the education of Aboriginal children who live in the inner city and provide choice for their families, but also to share some of the rich experience that they bring into the non-Indigenous experience of a school like mine. And so within 100 metres, 100 metres of where Pemulwuy's great contested resistance to first settlement occurred, a little Aboriginal school began. It took the name Gawara, which is the Gadigal Eora word for a whale. Beautiful symbol of strength and majesty and endurance and beauty and peace. And the whale was born inside a school. We were denied access to leased facilities in and around the city, refused access by landlords as soon as they'd found out that it was for Aboriginal children. I'm remembering the comment that was made that perhaps there is some latent racism still in this country. And we were refused access, so what we did was we placed the school inside the school, set aside an area, and a fully fledged Aboriginal school began. K to 6, 30 children, with remarkable outcomes. 12 years on, numbers of those children have graduated from year 12 or at university, and the first graduate has gone to Oxford. And so in 2015, I met Sean Gordon. Some of you will know Sean Gordon, CEO as he was at the time of the Darkinjung Aboriginal Land Council. And another partnership formed between the school of which I was then became principal, Barker College, and the Darkinjung Aboriginal Land Council, this time to take a disused government primary school in the Central Coast part of New South Wales and reinvent it as an Aboriginal school for families who were in that area. Many of those families were off-country. Virtually all of them were experiencing the kind of trauma to which Molly referred earlier, and which I saw firsthand as well. And those children, K to 6, are now, and even as I speak, they're at school and doing staggeringly well. The first 4 are now in year 8, and at Barker, they've come down into the secondary school, and the partnership concept, if I could return to the question, is chiefly about respectful listening and yielding if we are brave enough, yielding the power and authority which I'm afraid white Australia regards as its birthright, yielding that power and influence to others who know their children better than anyone else in the world, who are the experts in their culture and who can teach us so much. That's been my journey.
Let's wait there. Look, I think there's so much going on and an important session to follow, so I won't look for questions from the audience. But in closing, just to say that these partnerships create whole spectrums of opportunity for our children and young people. I hope that you've been inspired, enriched and informed from what you have heard from the panel members this afternoon. So without further ado, can you please join me in thanking the panel?